reflection as we situate ourselves and process after the assassination of Marielle Franco. So in order to acknowledge that climate, I'm going to ask that we start with a moment of silence, actually. Thank you. So today we brought together a group of scholars and really scholar activists, right, on all levels, in order to talk with our community about Marielle Franco, about her legacy, but also what this means right now at this juncture. Marielle Franco, as you all know, was a councilwoman from Rio de Janeiro. She was a fierce Black woman activist. She was a lesbian. She was a socialist. She was a very outspoken critic of police terror in Brazil. When we think about her and we think about her killing, we have to think about her in the summation of who she was, not as just one aspect of those things. In recognition of that, we brought together voices that can speak to those aspects. And so as I introduce people, and I want to, as much as possible, keep an informal tone with this, because I think that this is supposed to be, or at least the way that many of us have envisioned it, this is supposed to be a space of healing and a space of reflection, not a space of academic debate per se. So with that in mind, I'm going to do a brief introduction of each person and what they are contributing to the conversation and ask them to come up to the table. So I'll start with our guest. Dr. James Green is professor of history at Brown University and the executive director of the Brazilian Studies Association. He has, for many years, researched the history of Brazil's military dictatorship, the history of repression of the left in Brazil, and particularly the history and the contemporary reality of queer politics in Brazil. I want to welcome you. As somebody who has been an activist and within the left and within the LGBTQ movement in Brazil for quite some time, I believe that Professor Green can speak to much of how this particular loss is affecting those political communities, in particular in Brazil right now. The next person that I'm actually going to call to the table is Daniela Gomes. Daniela is one of our PhD candidates in African and African Diaspora Studies here at the University of Texas. She is also from Sao Paulo. She is a Black woman. She is an activist, and she is somebody who has circulated in the very communities that Marielle participated in for quite some time. And with that perspective, I'm going to invite Daniela Gomes to the table. We are also going to be joined by Carla Ramos, who is also a PhD candidate in African and African Diaspora Studies here at the University of Texas. She is actually in Brazil right now, and we are working to get her logged in online, so I'm going to, again, ask your forgiveness. I'm going to be messing with the computer as we're starting.
Would you like some help?
Yes.
Skype.
Yes. I'll be messing with the computer. We'll be fiddling with the computer as we're starting, making sure that we get Carla online. But before she gets online, I'll introduce her. And then later on, we will tell her how I introduced her. Yes, Fernanda? Carla Ramos is a long time, activist, black queer woman from Rio de Janeiro, who has many stories to tell. One of them being that she was one of the people that she went to school with Marielle Franco in Rio de Janeiro, and also part of her political activist circles, her black female circles in that space. We are very, very, very privileged to have her be willing to call in and talk to us at this very, very difficult time. I want to say in advance that remember that they knew each other, and so let's be careful and caring with that. Okay. Can I call on you, Dr. Green, to start? Can you sit there for 1 minute just so we can finish with the Skype?
Do you want me to speak from here?
Is that fine?
No,
is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Is your mic on?
Yes, I think it is. Can you hear me? Yes? Is it loud enough for people to hear me? Yes? Okay. So should I start?
Yes, please.
Okay.
If you lean into the mic, it'll probably.
Okay, so I'll lean into the mic. I
Yeah.
can do that. But, okay. This morning I was thinking of preparing some words, and then I decided to not do that and speak from the heart. I think everyone who is Brazilian, who loves Brazil, who has been to Brazil, has been profoundly shaken, much more than I think any of us would have imagined, by her death. The suddenness of her death has been shocking to all of us, and trying to understand and make sense of it within the context has been very hard. And so Christen asked me if I could give some context to this tragic moment in Brazilian history, and so I'm going to do that, and I think I've been asked to do it for 10 minutes, so I'm going to stick to my time. I actually heard of her death when I was talking to Jean Willis, who was a LGBT Congress person from Rio de Janeiro, who has been in Congress, I think, the person most attacked by the right, most threatened with his life. And he had just heard the news, and we were only able to talk 48 hours later. And so in a certain way, I can't say that I can speak on behalf of anyone, but I think I'm also going to try to channel some of the things that Jean Willis and I talked about what's happening in Brazil today. So those of you who follow the news of Brazil know about the military intervention in the city. There are many explanations for this, or many theories about why the Temer government, the illegal, illicit Temer government, did this. Perhaps it was to strengthen his own aspirations to be elected president in this year. Perhaps it was a way to cover the fact that his congressional coalition is unable to carry out some promised reactionary reforms in the Previdencia, the Social Security system, and other measures. Certainly it is a justification for a process that began with the impeachment of President Dilma Rousseff in 2016 to really turn back all of the progressive measures that were won prior to President Lula being elected president. Because I think we have to really understand this phenomenon of Brazil in the last 15 years is not the victory of the Workers' Party, but the victory of the social movements, the victory of the people who fought against the dictatorship, the people who organized in communities like Complexo de Maré, or the Black United Movement, or the LGBT movement, to fight for a true democracy after 21 years of military regime. And those of us who know the story of the military dictatorship and what happened know that in 1979, the amnesty law did not punish the people who committed gross violations of human rights, that is, the agents of the state who tortured and killed people, not having an evaluation of Brazil's recent past merely reinforced the legacy of 518 years of genocide and slavery. Not calling to account the responsibility of the state for having killed thousands of opponents of the military regime and continuing to kill hundreds of thousands of people over the history of the country. And we all know, and I don't need to reinforce this, we're all clear, I think who's here today knows this story, the genocide against the people of Brazil of color, especially Afro-descendants. So the excuses, and the most alarming thing if one follows the editorials today in Folha or in Estadão or Globo, is that the way in which her death is being read in Brazil by many is to say, A, it justifies a military intervention, which in my mind is the first step to a different kind of coup, different kind of authoritarian regime in the country, that she was perhaps aligned in some way directly, indirectly with some of the forces that are involved in the drug trafficking, and those of us who follow the social media know all of the lies and the calumnia that were spread around in the last 48 hours about these questions of fake news that was spread. And instead of understanding what this means, a woman who stood out courageously to fight against the way the police were intervening in the city and to challenge the ideas that there should be no truth commission connected to this military intervention because we don't want accountability for what we're going to do when we take over the city. We don't want people to investigate the tens, thousands of people who will be killed when we try to pacify Rio de Janeiro. The desire of the central government and its collaborators in Rio de Janeiro to justify the crisis, the economic crisis in the city, and the fact that some of the police have not been paid to justify the military intervention. All of this leaves us with a very serious challenge. I've been doing work in favor of human rights for 44 years, since I was 22 years old, and I'm not going to stop until I collapse someday from exhaustion. We're facing a very difficult time in Brazil right now. This is a time in which I assess that the left was historically defeated in its efforts to socially change the country, that there is a demoralization about the political system, there's cynicism. I think sectors of the left who were involved in making mistakes have not yet been able to do self-criticism of the errors they've made. We're facing the fact that a president who left with 80% of the approval rating is probably going to be put to jail in a week. If we think of the United States, Nixon committed many kinds of crimes, and he was pardoned, never spent a day of his life in jail, whereas Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is going to spend perhaps up to 4 or 5 years in jail. Those of us who care about Brazil need to be prepared to understand that this is going to be a long haul ahead, that the kinds of things we're going to have to think about doing, the kind of organizing we're going to have to do, the kind of coalition building that we're going to have to forge outside of the country and inside of the country is essential for supporting the social movements and the political organizations that want to continue the fight that Marielle represents as one of hundreds of thousands of people who have been involved in social change in Brazil, not just in recent times, but in the history of its country. And Christen and I had this conversation last night, but I had this conversation with Ramon Stern, who helps me at the Brazil Initiative and the Brazilian Studies Association, about how we understand her death. And I want to end on this note. Those of us who know the history of Brazil know that this represents continuity. It represents the ways in which the hierarchical nature of the country always treated as inhuman the people who produced the wealth of the country, and treated slaves and former slaves in a way that is unspeakable, and covered it with a discourse of harmony, social democracy, racial democracy, to cover the abuses of institutional racism and exploitation of indigenous people and then African descendants in the country, both as slaves and as free people, after abolition and before. And so there's nothing new in a woman of color being killed. There's nothing new in an activist being assassinated. There's nothing new in seeing LGBT people being marginalized and even killed, as we know in terms of the statistics of the number of people who are assassinated in Brazil every day. But there is something unique about this moment, I think, because Marielle represented not just a social activist from the Complexo de Maré, but a person who had been elected to office in Rio de Janeiro. And her death clearly was a message to us to give up, to be afraid, to retreat, to refuse to continue the fight. And so we owe her, and in homage to her, and in her legacy, to continue to find all the different ways we as scholars and as students and as postdoctoral candidates from Brazil here in Brazil, or as Bolsas Ambientistas, to continue to find ways that we can contribute to this fight. And I think that's the best way we can remember her legacy, her contribution, is to understand a luta continua. Muito obrigado.
Thank you, Dr. Green, for that heartfelt message. We have Carla online now.
We got this on the screen yesterday, so I know it can be done.
Well, what I actually want to do though is show the video, and so and Carla wants to speak last, and so we're gonna let her speak last, but she also wants to listen. So. Transnational solidarity looks like technical difficulty.
There she is.
Okay, perfect. Carla, we're going to let you, this is going to be a little awkward. Can you hear me? Carla?
Posso ouvir? Yes.
Okay.
I do.
Eu vou falar em português rapidinho. Vai ser um pouco estranho, porque eu acho que a gente vai deixar você aí enquanto eu passo o vídeo. Pode ser? Desculpa,
Tranquilo.
porque eu sei que você quer assistir. Tá?
Não, tranquilo, Christen, tranquilo. Obrigada.
De nada. Sorry. So the video, so one person who's unable to make it today because of a death in her family, and this is about it, is Carla Silva Mohammed. And she suggested that we show this particular video, which is one that I also think is extremely relevant and powerful. And for those of you that are just getting to know this story, hopefully this will help to put it into context. And thank you, Dr. Green, again, for giving us the background, because I think that we have to understand this within a national and international political context in order to even start the conversation, which is why your presence here is so important.
Isso é secular! Olha o nosso Brasil como que está!
Muito tiro. Mas não deu pra mim ouvir, eu tava escutando futebol, eu tava jogando futebol, aí eu vi que tava muita polícia aqui, aí eu vi aqui, aí tinha 9 balas no chão e e 3 pessoas mortas ali dentro do carro.
2 pessoas muito queridas assassinadas aqui. Eu estou em contato desde cedo, desde o momento do crime, com o delegado Rivaldo, que acabou de assumir a chefia da Polícia Civil. A Polícia Civil deu toda a cobertura, a Delegacia de Homicídio já assumiu o caso. A gente vai cobrar com rigor. Todas as características são características de execução.
Foi muita tristeza. Todo mundo triste. Foi mais várias pessoas chorando.
Uma das nossas companheiras pretas do Conselho Nacional e na sequência Estado. E aí sim, todas as vidas importam. Marielle sempre presente no ataque. É tribunal a intervenção por Marielle. É tribunal a intervenção. Marielle era lésbica. Além de negra, trabalhadora, por favor, não esqueçam. Nosso recado é que seremos cada vez mais e mais mulheres negras ocupando todos os espaços para denunciar toda forma de racismo, do Estado e matar a Marielle, e matar muitos de nós.
Vamos, pessoas, vamos sair do sofá. Dizem que o brasileiro não tem memória, que o brasileiro não tem atitude. Temos atitude sim. Olha essa multidão de pessoas aqui saindo dos seus trabalhos, largando a sua vida, para botar a cara e dizer: isso não pode ser esquecido. Marielle, presente.
Levantar a mão pra mim. Você vai se arrepender de levantar a mão pra mim. Você vai se arrepender de levantar a mão pra mim.
So the images that you saw there are images of her funeral turned protest march, which had thousands and thousands and thousands of people. No matter what the New York Times reports. I don't want to take up a lot of space or time, but I do want to say a couple of words before Daniela speaks. I have been Carla, deixa eu perguntar uma coisa.
Diga.
Você pode colocar o mudo até seu momento de falar?
Posso.
Porque a gente está ouvindo a
Posso.
rua. Pode ser? I have been doing research on police violence in Brazil and the Black community's responses to it since 2005. As Dr. Green mentioned earlier, this keeps happening. But with the death of Marielle, something changed. And I think the thing that changed, at least for many of us, is that it is now clear that the powers that be are targeting those of us that speak out against this violence. That's always been the case. But this was a little different. It wasn't different in the sense that she was a Black woman from a favela at the margin. But it was different in the sense that this was a clearly political act designed to send a message to those who organize. That is something that affects all of us who care about these issues in ways that are difficult to express in words. I did not know her. We have a lot of friends in common, but I did not know her. But I know her struggle. I know her politics. I know that she wanted what all of us who have been doing this work want. And that is for the state to stop killing us. She said as much in one of her last tweets. She expressed as much in her last public appearance at a Black women's event in Lapa, titled Changing the Structures, Changing the System for all intents and purposes, mudando as estruturas. Things are the same, but they are also very different. And everything is still very, very raw and hard to understand and hard to see right now. What I know is that this hurts very, very deeply. For many, many reasons. It hurts deeply to know that a daughter has lost her mother. It hurts deeply to know that a mother has lost her daughter. It hurts deeply to know that a community has lost its representation, its voice, that person that fought for them, that person that was willing to stand up to authority and speak truth to power in ways that she knew put her life in danger. When everybody started changing their profile pictures to be Marielle, some of that's always a little bit trite, right? Like, you can be honest about that. Some of that is just about the moment, etc. But for many of us, we felt this in ways that could hit very, very quickly. The first thing that I did when I found out that she was killed was frantically text my friends. Because that's always a possibility. This is a real struggle, and people are really out there, and people are really doing this work, and people are really facing death threats. And the words that young person cited at Marielle's funeral, once Black women get free, we will all get free, because we are the bottom of society, comes from the Come By Hebrew for Collective statement, comes from Black feminism, comes from what Marielle read, comes from what Marielle believed in, comes from a global movement that many of us belong to. Marielle is all of us, at least those of us that have been in this movement and are continuing to speak out in this movement. And so the question is, where do we go from here? I'm going to pass this to Daniela.
Good afternoon. I don't know how it goes do roll call attendance here in the US. I have never been to school here. But in Brazil, when we do roll call attendance, the answer that we give when the professor calls our name, the teacher calls our name, is presente. So I'm going to say some names, and after I say those names, I want you all to say presente. Okay? Amarildo de Souza.
Presente.
Cláudia Ferreira da Silva.
Presente.
Fernando Luiz de Paula.
Presente.
Jonas Soares dos Santos.
Presente.
Igor Silva Oliveira.
Presente.
Davidson Lopes Ferreira.
Presente.
Wilker Thiago.
Presente.
Eduardo Oliveira.
Presente.
Tiago Marcos.
Presente.
Leandro Pereira.
Presente.
Antônio Neves.
Presente.
Tiago Teixeira.
Presente.
Presley Santos.
Presente.
Davidson Lopes Ferreira.
Presente.
Letícia Vieira.
Presente.
Jailton Vieira.
Presente.
Joseval Amaral.
Presente.
Everson Pereira.
Presente.
Ricardo Vilas Boas.
Presente.
Jefferson Pereira dos Santos.
Presente.
João Luiz Pereira Rodrigues.
Presente.
Adriano de Souza Guimarães.
Presente.
Vitor Amorim de Araújo.
Presente.
Agenor Vitalino dos Santos.
Presente.
Bruno Pires.
Presente.
Tiago Gomes das Virgens.
Presente.
Natanael de Jesus Costa.
Presente.
Rodrigo Martins de Oliveira.
Presente.
Kaique Bastos.
Presente.
Wilton.
Presente.
Wesley.
Presente.
Cleiton.
Presente.
Carlos Eduardo.
Presente.
Roberto.
Presente.
Anderson Gomes.
Presente.
Marielle Franco.
Presente.
Marielle Franco.
Presente.
Marielle Franco.
Presente.
Obrigada. For those of you who knows me, I am a really outspoken person. I am really usually smiling. But in the activism in Brazil, what we say is like when we need to fight, it's no smile and our fists closed. So that's why here today it's poucas ideias, as we say in Portuguese. Short dialogue. There is not a lot to say. All these names that I talked here now, they are victims of police assassination in Brazil. So Amarildo Souza is disappeared since 2013. Nobody knows where his body is. Cláudia Ferreira da Silva was dragged by a car for more than 2 miles after the police killed her in Rio de Janeiro. The other people that I said the name are victims of the Chacina de Osasco. Chacina de Osasco happened in 2015, killing 18 people with the same bullets that killed Marielle. The same bullets, which coincidentally are bullets from the Federal Police of Brazil, that was stolen. How the Federal Police, like the most powerful public security department in the country, just had bullets stolen. And coincidentally again, it goes to the hands of the police of São Paulo, who killed 18 people in a chacina, which is basically a mass murder. You enter in a space and you kill people. And it's not like mass shootings here in the US. You kill target people. The other names that I said was from Chacina do Cabula in Bahia, in Salvador. More 12 deaths from the police of Salvador. The other names that I saw, that I mentioned here, was from Chacina de Costa Barros in Rio de Janeiro. More 5 deaths. 111 bullets in a car that was like driven by black boys who are celebrating their first job. And then I said the names of Anderson Gomes and Marielle Franco. So what's going on with Marielle is not new. There is one thing that I learned since I was a child growing up in the ghetto in São Paulo, is that you don't mess with the police in Brazil. You don't talk back to the police in Brazil. A first memory that I have from the police in Brazil is when I was like 80 years old, the police invaded my school and we had all to shut down, to go to the floor because they were looking for some kind of thief inside the school with guns on their hands. That's the memory that we have of the police in Brazil. And when we say like a lot of people die in Brazil from lost bullets, balas perdidas. What is a bala perdida? It's when someone is shooting, you are not the target, and the bullet just catch you. But it's really unbelievable how these bullets that are everywhere just shoot black people. They always find a place on black bodies. So it's our bodies that are being the target there. It's our bodies that are being collectively murdered. 83 black deaths per day in Brazil, 83. Each 24 hours. Most of them, black men from 12 to 24 years old. In the early 90s, a journalist in Brazil named Caco Barcelos created a book named Rota 66, or Route 66, where he investigated the actions of the military police of São Paulo, named as Rota. And he investigated the assassination of all people who are involved by those police officers. This police department was one that once arrived in a place, you knew nobody would survive. No matter if you are involved in any illegal activity or not. And I don't consider those activities illegal, because if you don't give justice, food, education for people, you cannot consider people illegal or whatever they do to survive. So you don't mess with the police in Brazil. In 2011, a white woman, just to change a little bit, named Patricia Scioli, she was a judge, and she was investigating the police of Rio de Janeiro. She was assassinated. So it's a constant practice. The thing is that Marielle was talking against military intervention in Rio de Janeiro, and as she said, for us as black people, the military intervention already exists and has been existing since the slavery. Our bodies was the police in Brazil and the police in the US, because we cannot forget that this is a transnational project.
This is not a Brazilian case. It's easier for us to come here and talk about Brazil because now it's Marielle's dead. But we need to talk about Cassandra Bland. We need to talk about Trayvon Martin. We need to talk about Philando Castillo. We need to talk about all these people. Like, how many more of us need to die? That's what was the question that Marielle did that day in one of her last public appearances. Like, how many more of us need to die for people to do something? And we don't need, of course, this is a really moment that we are all sad, we are all grieving, but we don't need your sympathy. We need actions. We are tired. I have been fighting since I was 12 years old. I am 36. How many older black people right here in Austin, right here in this country, have been fighting for their whole lives? How many black people have died? And the society keeps thinking that something that it's like an exception. Oh no, it's an exception. It was one case. No, it's not an exception. 23 black people die in this country per day. Here in the US. We are still in the bottom line of the society. We are still under poverty. We are still living with lack of education. So they kill us physically and they kill us epistemologically as well, all the time. They are killing us in mass all the time. So I don't want to take a lot of your time, but what I want to do is like keep thinking, keep reflecting, keep mourning, keep being terrified by the news and the newspapers, but go to action as well. You guys don't need to act for us, but we need to do something. Because for us, now it's poucas ideias. We don't have a lot more to say. We are going to fight. And for me, what is most important, as Dr. Smith said, this case of Marielle shows for the first time in Brazil, it's the first time in Brazil that I have seen people going to streets like that for the death of a black woman or a black person in general. And it's, of course, this military intervention that is part of the scope that we are suffering in Brazil since 2013-16 with the impeachment of President Dilma. It's part of this scenario, but it's not responsible for it all. Because as Felipe Carneiro says, between left and right, we are still black. During Governo Dilma and Governo Lula, which one of the left that was elected by black people mostly, we were the ones who were marching for them. We were the ones who were giving our votes for them, giving our lives for them. They created laws they created public policies that benefited us, as people like to say, but they created laws that facilitated the black genocide in Brazil. They didn't do anything to stop that, and they had the power in their hands. So we were there for them, but when was the time for them to be there for us, they were not. The left party was not there for them. So I want to know now, and especially for those who are seeing me in Brazil, I want to know now if the left is going to be there for Marielle. Because it's not the moment for the left just use that as a flag to say, hey, they are killing leftists. No, they are killing black people. We are the ones who are being murdered. We are the ones who are being murdered. And it doesn't matter the government in Brazil. Doesn't matter if you are during the kingdom, if you are during the democracy, the republic, if you are like the military dictatorship, if you are during the amnesty, if you are during the right, the left, we are the targets. Black people haven't been the targets in Brazil. And we are tired of keeping paying this price. For what? For a nation that doesn't care about us? A nation that, excuse me, my French, doesn't give a fuck about us? We're just tired. That's it. So, I am here today per Marielle. I am here today for each one of the victims of police brutality, police violence, and police assassination in Brazil. But I am here today for me as well. Because I could be Marielle. I could be the person who has been murdered with 4 bullets on my face. That's what I need to call my mom every day and cry with her and say, hey, please, don't believe things they are saying about her, because that could be me. Because she was saying the same things that I say. And all these lies that they are creating about her are not an exception as well. They always do that. All these cases that I mentioned here, that all these names that are had here were accused of being involved with criminal organizations. And in the end, it was proven that none of them were. So, this is not new. Thank you for your time. Again, it's time to fight. I am really grateful for your support, but we need more than that. Thank you.
Vamos lá, tudo certo aí? Vocês podem me ouvir?
Sim, muito bem.
Tá. Boa tarde a todos e a todas. Good afternoon, buenas tardes. Obrigada, eu queria agradecer a professora Christen Smith. Suzana, muito obrigada por ter posicionado o computador de modo que eu pudesse ver aí, Daniela, o que a Daniela acabou de falar. Obrigada ao professor James Green por ter começado essa conversa e a todos que estão presentes. Eu vou falar em português e vou pedir ajuda de Daniela para o que for possível. Tá bom, Dani? Pode ser?
Tudo bem, Carla.
A primeira vez que eu vou conversar publicamente sobre o que aconteceu. Então, vocês me desculpem se eventualmente eu não conseguir terminar algumas coisas, algumas reflexões. Bom, então, estamos muito chocados aqui. Eu conheci a Marielle há muitos anos, a gente se conhece, eu conheci a Marielle desde a minha época de graduação, no final da década de 90, no Rio de Janeiro.
So, it is the first time I am talking about this, and I say I'm sorry if I'm not gonna be able to finish. And I met Marielle when I was in school.
Então, o que a gente tem tentado fazer, eu e muitas amigas minhas, muitas outras mulheres negras, a gente tem conversado bastante em diferentes fóruns, desde mídias sociais a conversas privadas em casa, conversamos sobre o que aconteceu, muito.
So what we have been trying to do, myself and other colleagues, other friends, is try to make this conversation happen in different forums, in different ways, through social media, personally.
Porque essa pergunta, esse ponto que o professor James Green colocou, e Christen também na sequência, a respeito o que essa execução sumária, o que ela aponta, o que ela transforma nesse cenário político bastante complexo que a gente está passando agora no Brasil, mas que não é novo.
Because this question that Professor James Green pointed out and Dr. Smith agreed with that, it's what this assassination says. What is the point that is this bringing now, which is of course not something new.
Então, o que eu vou tentar fazer é trazer aqui algumas questões que a gente tem refletido em corrente aqui no Brasil. A cidade aí, nesse contexto, são muitas pontas. Eu acho que o exercício profícuo é a gente falar muito sobre isso, e porque são muitos ângulos, como eu disse, é uma complexidade para a gente dar conta como analistas, como ativistas, enfim, para entender, para conseguir falar sobre isso de uma maneira que de fato seja efetiva, do ponto de vista da transformação social.
So I'm going to bring some points here. Those are points that we have been talking as a collective fight to point out the complexity of this situation, because those angles in this situation are really complex. It's hard to work with that, and it's necessary to have a general approach to understand a little bit more, so we can try to create some layers of how these things are working.
A primeira coisa que eu gostaria de colocar para todos nós aqui, para a conversa, é a seguinte. Eu estava numa conversa mais cedo com a minha companheira, pensando a respeito de como começar essa nossa conversa hoje, né? Eu, particularmente, daqui do Brasil, em conversa com vocês, em diálogo. E a primeira coisa que ela chamou a atenção foi a seguinte: mas será que se trata de um legado? É por aí que é a conversa que vocês vão ter hoje?
So the first thing that she wants to highlight is that she was talking with her partner this morning about this forum here, about this event, and her partner brought something to her attention that was really important, because she asked, it's really regarding a legacy. Is that how we want to start this conversation?
A ideia de legado sugere uma questão, né, de alguma obra fechada, estática, alguma coisa que se deixa, né? Alguma obra acabada que se deixa. Isso, obviamente, falando de maneira mais impressionista. Mas ela chamou atenção para mim dizendo o seguinte: por que não pensar de outra maneira? A gente está falando de uma mulher negra, né? Está falando de centenas e dezenas de milhares de mulheres negras. E ela disse: eu acho que talvez Marielle tenha deixado, não um legado, mas ela tenha apontado e deixado para a gente rotas de fuga e de insubmissão.
So the idea of a legacy implicitly is talking about something that's done, some work that was finished. And what Marielle brought to us was not exactly something that was done, because these are dozens and hundreds of thousands of black women doing something similar to that. So it was more like an idea of routes of escape, routes of ways to run away this situation.
Marielle é um perfeito, se a gente observar com calma, Marielle é esse corpo negro em movimento, apontando as diversas possibilidades de insubmissão, de transgressão, de ruptura, de radicalidade, né? No fazer política, vou falar de maneira geral.
So if you think of Marielle as an example, she's exactly an example of how being a transgressor, by how being rupture with the system and being subject in a certain way.
Então, de certa maneira, Marielle vai ser executada depois de um evento que ela participou na Casa das Pretas, no Rio de Janeiro. Para quem não está familiarizado, a Casa das Pretas é uma casa de acolhimento, é uma casa de fato, é uma casa aberta, organizada e levada adiante por um grupo de feministas negras no Rio de Janeiro, de diferentes idades. E essa casa fica com as portas abertas para os mais variados eventos que dizem respeito à questão mais direta sobre mulheres negras e política no sentido mais amplo possível.
So Marielle was assassinated after she left an event in Casa das Pretas, em Rio de Janeiro. Casa das Pretas literally translated as Black Women's House. For those who are not familiar, the Casa das Pretas in Rio de Janeiro is a space, is literally a house that has its doors open for black women to create any kind of events that are related to black female feminist struggle.
E ali a Casa das Pretas é um exemplo interessante para se pensar como há uma efervescência dos últimos 3, 4 anos, principalmente pós-golpe institucional que acontece no Brasil, uma efervescência muito grande de diversos movimentos, de diversos segmentos de mulheres negras, falando especificamente da cidade do Rio de Janeiro. A Casa das Pretas é um grande símbolo, é um grande lugar por onde a gente passa o tempo todo, pode encontrar as amigas, pode encontrar as coisas mais incríveis acontecendo. A gente encontra pessoas, mulheres negras, fazendo as mais diferentes coisas, mulheres negras jornalistas, cineastas, cantoras, cozinheiras, empregadas domésticas, ativistas, professoras universitárias, tem todo tipo ali se a gente for pensar, né, de maneira mais sintética, todo tipo de fronte político dos mais contemporâneos ali no Rio de Janeiro, a gente, por exemplo, encontra na Casa das Pretas. E Marielle estava ali e saiu dali.
So, yeah, the Casa das Pretas is a symbol of this turmoil that we are observing in Brazil since the coup in 2016. where black women are moving themselves in different spaces for to fight and to be together and to manifest their struggle. So at Casa das Pretas, you are going to meet journalists, move makers, directors, domestic workers. It's a place where people are coming and going and meeting their friends and socializing in different ways as a safe space. And Marielle was coming when she was assassinated, specifically from this place.
Então acho que tem aí, a Casa das Pretas é uma grande rota de fuga, né? Se a gente ampliar a metáfora. E eu acho que é um lugar de onde a gente também pode pensar muito a respeito do que significa essa luta contemporânea de mulheres negras na diáspora, né? Marielle está ali numa rota de fuga, junto com outras tantas mulheres negras ativistas, mostrando outros caminhos possíveis de se fazer política, de se fazer afeto, de se conectar, de entender o mundo, de reivindicar, de se fortalecer. Então tem uma complexidade ali também interessante de compreender para a gente aumentar aí a picture dessa situação, dessa circunstância e desse contexto.
So Casa das Pretas can be perceived as a route for escape, and it's in a diasporic contest. Marielle was exactly in this place that works as a route. And it's really important to understand that, so we can understand this more complex perspective that is part of this case.
Então, eu acho que é preciso sair daí, desse lugar também, e lembrando um pouco do momento trágico, né, de toda a conjuntura que precede esse momento trágico da execução de Marielle. Os assassinos estavam ali na frente da Casa das Pretas, literalmente aguardando, já vigiando, né, a saída dela, o encerramento do evento, e depois que ela sai do evento, ela é perseguida e é executada algumas ruas à frente. Então a gente também ficamos muito chocados também com a possibilidade. É isso, né? Eles poderiam ter subido na casa, eles podiam ter feito a tragédia ficar bastante mais dramática, né? Eu quero pegar essa questão e levar para um outro ponto, que é um ponto final que eu gostaria de chamar a atenção também.
So, the killers of Marielle were waiting for her in front of the Casa das Pretas, in front of this place. And that's really meaningful. It's something that we want to point out now, because they waited for her as she left in her car. They killed her few streets away of that, but they could at any moment go up there in the Casa das Pretas, enter the space, and the tragedy would be even bigger. So this is a point that she wants to take to come to another argument.
Acho que uma última questão aí para a gente colocar seria uma questão que já está colocada, mas muito embora esteja colocada, mas quem carrega somos nós, mulheres negras, né? E população negra em geral. A vulnerabilidade dos nossos corpos, né? Isso está colocado. Então, Marielle, uma vereadora, uma das 5 mais votadas da cidade, com um discurso racial crítico, afinadíssimo, um discurso bastante crítico em relação a uma série de questões, em relação à polícia, em relação às elites brasileiras, em relação, enfim, ao golpe que acontece no Brasil agora, que acaba de acontecer no Brasil agora, em relação a dezenas de outras questões, uma postura muito crítica e aguerrida, completamente vulnerável, né? Então ela não tem uma escolta, ela não tem seguranças, ela não tem sequer um motorista minimamente com habilidades para lidar com circunstâncias desse tipo, estando ela numa cidade do Rio de Janeiro, que é uma cidade em guerra. Enfim, esse é um ponto, eu finalizo em seguida.
So the point that she wants to bring, and that was already said, but she wants to highlight, is the vulnerability of our bodies as black women and as black people in general. Marielle was the 5th most voted councilwoman in Rio de Janeiro. She had 50,000 votes, and she had a discourse that was critically talking about against racism, against exclusion, against police brutality, and she was really passionate about that. She was talking with passion. She was talking like in a way with confrontation. And she didn't have an escort. She didn't have someone to be her bodyguard. She didn't have even a driver that was prepared to face a situation like that in a city like Rio de Janeiro.
Isso é muito dramático de constatar. Está havendo alguma discussão em relação a isso, e o partido dela, que é o PSOL, o Partido Socialismo e Liberdade, tem respondido, eu considero respondido com uma certa, de um jeito um pouco agressivo a esses questionamentos, não oficialmente, mas eu tenho visto isso nas redes sociais, dizendo que Marielle não tinha sido oficialmente ameaçada, e, portanto, não entrava ali, não cumpria ali o protocolo de ter ali uma escolta, de ter especificamente um cuidado aí que se relacionasse à segurança física dela. É muito cedo para falar em relação a essas questões agora, mas eu acho que elas são importantíssimas porque, afinal de contas, Marielle não está mais aqui, e muito por conta de uma pouca discussão, de nenhuma discussão a respeito disso, né? Então, os partidos de esquerda, é preciso a gente também prestar atenção a isso, né? A presença dos corpos negros, de ativistas negros, nesses partidos de esquerda do Brasil, eu acho que em outros lugares da América Latina, Caribe e Centro-América também, o total desrespeito e despreparo em relação a essa vulnerabilidade que está historicamente colocada. Isso não é um dado novo. Marielle não ficou vulnerável porque se tornou uma vereadora e por isso tinha mais canais de publicizar a sua crítica social. Ela nasceu vulnerável e no entanto, é isso.
So, Marielle was elected by the PSOL, the Socialist and Liberty Party, and when talking about the situation of Marielle not having a bodyguard, not officially, but usually in social media, this party has been really avoiding the conversation and answering that in a really hard way, not being responsive to that question. And when they answer that, they say, oh, Marielle was not officially threatened. She didn't receive any official threat. And Carla calls attention for this conversation among the leftist party, not only in Brazil, but also in Latin America, in South America, Central America, where black bodies are essential part of the formation of these parties, but there is not a caution about how those bodies are going to be treated. Other thing is Marielle didn't become vulnerable because she was a councilwoman in the PSOL, in this party specifically. She was born vulnerable because as black people we are born vulnerable.
Então eu acho que esse ponto torna a questão ainda mais séria do ponto de vista. É isso, perdemos uma irmã nesse caminho e essa irmã que abriu tanto caminho para a gente e apontou tantas rotas de fuga, né? Tantas rotas possíveis. Ela exercitou isso de uma maneira intensa ao longo dos 38 anos dela aqui, né? Entre nós, no plano terreno. Então, perdemos ela, ninguém traz de volta, não é possível. Perdemos uma liderança negra, uma mulher, como ela dizia, né? Uma mulher negra de favela, mãe, filha, com a companheira dela. Enfim, perdemos isso e precisamos ter calma para fazer essa discussão, não parar de acontecer. Um outro dado importante também que eu acho que a gente tem que discutir, levar isso muito em consideração, é que Marielle vinha com, né, uma ascensão política muito importante no Rio de Janeiro, possivelmente para as próximas eleições aí, para prefeito, governador, possivelmente ela seria uma das possíveis aí, né, um dos possíveis nomes e personalidades aí nesse caminho para eleições majoritárias. Então, há também essa configuração muito difícil de compreender, eu acho ainda, mas que a gente tem que refletir sobre ela, dessa mulher negra aí que estava atingindo aí possibilidades e patamares realistas aí de alcançar lugares em eleições majoritárias como para prefeito e governador. Então, também tem esse ponto, essa conjuntura, para levar em consideração esse ponto dentro da conjuntura, né? É a execução, é a eliminação dessa possibilidade real de a gente realmente ter uma mudança de panorama político, do ponto de vista partidário, no Rio de Janeiro, que está no Brasil.
So, in a brief, we lost a sister. We lost someone that was a black leadership in Brazil. And that's not going to come back. We lost a black woman who was an activist, who came from the favelas communities, who are a mother, who was living with her partner, and was outspoken about that, about her situation as a black women from the favelas, black lesbian women from the favelas. And another thing that's necessary to highlight is that Marielle had an assumption in the political situation in Brazil, specifically in Rio de Janeiro. She was being considered for different positions in receiving a lot of space and a lot of attention. So probably for the future elections in Brazil, she would be considered by her party as maybe for a mayor position or for a governor position. So it's a black woman from the favelas with this full background talking in a place of in a public space, but in a place that would achieve different situations, highlighted situations in the political Brazil, bringing a different scenario for the political situation in Brazil. So that's also meaningful, how the assassination of black women talks about a change of a political scenario in Brazil.
E é isso. Obrigada a todos e a todas.
So this is it. Thank you very much, you all. Thank you, Dr. Smith. It's already here, but we would like to open up for questions. I think we have a few minutes.
Some people probably have to move from one class to the next, so wait a second. As everyone is starting to think, can you please say your name?
Okay, my name is Alessandro, and I am from Brazil. I was invited to stay here like a thinker visiting professor, and I have a project together, Dr. Smith, about the violence against black women in Brazil and USA and the struggle for rights. So I would like that you comment, and I would like to listen your comment about this fight between this tension, I think is better, between black movement and left movement. How you bring Daniela and you bring Carla, because we can saw in the media network all the time, and some parts of the left movement in Brazil try and bring that, she was killed because belonged to the left, and quickly black movement and put your position about, no, she was killed because he's black. So, of course, that is in a case of intersection, but I really appreciated your idea about this. Thank you.
I think what we'll do is we'll pass the mic around, so that way everyone can hear. We're going to take a set of three questions, and then we'll respond, and then we'll take a set of three. Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Salome from Argentina, from Buenos Aires. I don't know if I have questions. I'm a historian. I'm a researcher about witchcraft and violence against women in Middle Ages, and actually I'm researching about witchcraft in America, especially black women witches. And I'm very sad about what happened. I was working in politics in Buenos Aires, and I'm an activist also. And I just want to say thank you for this meeting. Beyond that, it's really sad. It's necessary to make all these debates all the time, because the only way to fight against all these things is a new era of the fights for women. It's debating in universities, in cultural places like here, for Latinos especially, and for Brazilians in this case. I think we must continue the fight from all the places where we are. We must fight. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you for holding this photo. And thank you, Carla, because I know it's very difficult for you. And I'm glad to see you. We miss you here. My name is Micaela. I'm a PhD student here in the African and African Diaspora Studies program. And I have a question from people on Facebook, from one of the students who is completing his master's in Lilacs. His name is Juan. And he wants to know what you all would suggest that we could do from Austin. What is there that we can do from here? Thank you. Thank you to everyone. We're going to answer those three questions, or just respond to the question and the comment. Thank you. And then move forward. So the first question was about the left, or we can start wherever you want to start as well.
Yeah, I don't think there is a tension between the left and the black movement. The black movement in Brazil was partially founded by people. When I talk about black movement, I want to be clear that black movement is composed by different organizations and people who are not part of organizations at all. But a lot of people in the black movement was part of the left, and helped to create those leftist parties in Brazil. The thing that is going on now is it's a political moment in Brazil where we know that things are really delicate, that things are really too polarized, and we don't want to be part of this game. That's it. We don't want to be part of this game. We don't want Marielle's that being a piece in a game where they decide who is the evil, the worst one. That's not the case. Marielle was not that for her political perspective, because how many people from the left are dead? How many people from the left in Brazil received 4 bullets in their face? Right now, I'm asking right now. I'm not asking about the military dictatorship. I'm asking right now. In 2018, how many leftists in Brazil died? So Marielle is the first one. And there is a situation in the country and in the diaspora where nobody likes outspoken black women. You are too angry, you are too atrevida. How can I say that in English? Too bold. You are too bold. So you need to be quiet. You need to shut up, because that's not it's not up to you to talk. That's why they killed Marielle. So there is a tension between the left and the right. There is a tension, but in the end, as Felipe Carneiro says, we are still black. So no matter who is going to be in the power, our bodies are the ones who are going to be targeted.
say one thing. This is a very, very complicated question you asked, and I think that there's a moment to think about things, and maybe this is a debate for another time. I was thinking very much about Chico Mendes today. It's right, Chico Mendes, who some of you may know as a rubber worker who was killed, political assassination. I think because political parties and social movements have worked together and not worked together well, and I'm the first to critique the left, being a member of the left for many years and fighting for gay rights and lesbian rights within the left and being very well known for that. Marielle chose to be in a political, she chose her path not just to be a community organizer, but to be involved in a political party, and she chose a political party. And that's about what's happening at Brown today on the same topic. And she chose PSOL. And I have to respect that decision of hers and understand why she said, this is where I want to do my work now. It's not just as a community organizer or as a sociologist or as a person in public administration. And I think we all can say 1,000 things about the way the left has failed. My movements, my identities, those of many people that I know in Brazil and outside of Brazil. How they're failing today in the United States in so many ways. But I think we have to understand that people make choices about where they want to do their political work, and I think we have to respect that. And I think, listen, I was with Dilma Rousseff 2 weeks in the United States, and they had 2 security. She could have been killed any moment. It was just like no one wanted to kill her, and I think there's a good reason why we're making this argument that black women are targets, and she was a target because she was a political leader in ascension. And I think we have to recognize that and understand that. But unfortunately, I think she is the first of many more people who are not just activists or just people going through their daily lives and being the subjects of police brutality and arbitrariness and all the things we know about, but because specifically showing the world that there's specific people we want to kill in order to silence us. And I spent 2 days talking to Jean Willis about his situation. And those of you who understand Brazil know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to go into the details and discuss him today, but the threat that many, many people have of being targets. We're going through the beginning of a very right turn in Brazil, which is going to last for years. We need to be prepared to understand that and come together and defend each other in social movements, in the political parties we don't agree with on all their policies and what they've done and want to criticize. And I'm saying, I think one of the wonderful things that the black movement has done in Brazil is to criticize ferociously the political parties for their shortcomings. And I'm not trying to say that to silence that at all, on the contrary. Because I think we need to be outside political parties criticizing them, and then if we choose to be within them in certain moments for political gains or political purposes. So I think that's what I wanted to contribute to the conversation here. It's a very complex one, the question you raised, and I don't think there's simple answers to it.
Somebody typed in there and tell her that she her mic. But she put it in.
She put it on mute.
Carla, a gente não está te ouvindo.
Ah, sim. Eu posso fazer uma parte nessa questão. Eu considero. Tem um dado que é relevante, se a gente perder ele no horizonte, a gente não entende. A Marielle escolheu sim um partido político em determinado momento da vida dela, mas ela transitava, inclusive por movimentos sociais, inclusive na academia, inclusive em todo lugar. E não foi à toa que ela foi essa perspectiva nova que nós, mulheres negras no Rio de Janeiro, encontramos para dialogar, para apoiar e para se orgulhar e espelhar. Então, ela escolhe o partido político, sim, mas o partido político é um meio, é mais uma rota, mas não é só essa. Dani, você quer?
Yes, she wanna talk a little bit about this comment because Marielle was part of a political party and we need to respect that, but she was not just that. And what is most important is that Marielle was able to transit, to navigate between one place and another. So she navigated in the communities organization, she navigated through political parties, through the academic space,
And that's why she became this voice that black women saw themselves like recognize it so strongly. So that's important to highlight.
E nesse sentido, para usar um exemplo que o professor James Green acabou de colocar, do deputado Jean Willis, Jean Willis não fazia metade do que Marielle fazia em termos de circulação na cidade, entre pessoas e entre lugares. Metade. Então é um outro personagem, é uma outra coisa. E é preciso que a gente leve isso em consideração novamente para entender esse contexto, como vocês têm falado aí, repetido, absolutamente complexo.
So another thing that it's important to take the point that Professor James Green brought is that the Deputy Congressman Jean Willis didn't navigate half of what Marielle were able to navigate. He didn't do half of what Marielle was doing. So it's a completely different context, a completely different situation that we need to point out to understand this complex issue.
E só uma última coisa, eu não abro mão e não vou relativizar o fato de Marielle não ter segurança. Não vou fazer isso, nem um passo atrás. É um absurdo. Ela estava sozinha, desprotegida e essa discussão sequer acontecia. Então não vou abrir mão disso.
So, and just to end, we are not going to forget the situation that Marielle didn't have a bodyguard. She was by herself, and this conversation was not even happening in any moment, even the things that she was saying.
Eu falo como mais uma mulher negra e eu acho que todas elas vão repetir a mesma coisa. A gente não abre mão da discussão para provocar, já que agora é o que resta para a gente, já que perdemos ela, para provocar esse debate. É fundamental. Não dá para diluir a discussão, muito menos para relativizar.
So, I talk as a black woman because there is no way, it's a way to provoke a discussion, to cause a discussion, because we cannot forget. There is no way to forget the situation or to create something ambiguous. False equivalence. Vai responder o Juan?
Sim. Carla, tá me ouvindo?
Sim. Estou te ouvindo, professora.
A última pergunta de Juan, eu não sei se você ouviu, ela queria saber o que a gente pode fazer neste momento. E eu acho que seria interessante a gente encerrar com essa ideia. O que você acha?
Eu acho, tudo bem, podemos.
Eu vou me traduzir, só um minutinho.
Certo.
So I think we're at the end of our time, and I know that that's difficult. We have actually another event that's happening, and so that's part of the reason why we have to be careful of time. And you know, I feel like we're leaving in the middle. I'm not gonna lie, but I think that Juan's question is one that's a good one to actually end with. What can we do? And I do think that there are things that we can do. And so maybe each of us can go around and say what we believe can be done right now as a way to end. Vamos começar com Carla? Carla, você pode começar? Ou não? Pode ser não também.
Eu posso ouvir melhor e aí eu posso, enfim, falar em seguida se vocês toparem também.
Yeah, you know, I'm gonna transmit a message. One of my students at Brown, Watufani Po, who's in Africana Studies and History, and Kisha Kampere, a professor in Africana Studies, we organize an event in Brown today at the same time, and they came up yesterday with a proposal to do a crowdfunding to raise money in this country for Anderson and Mariette's daughter, and I volunteered, but it could be someone else, to make sure that money very transparently gets to the families when I go to Rio in May. It doesn't have to be me, but that's a vehicle we found in Brown. We have our social networks. Maybe that's an appropriate thing to think about for doing here in Texas as well. I think that kind of support it's very symbolic. It's minimal, but I think it's important, especially as people want to do something immediately to respond. It's a short-term possibility. So I'm just putting that on the table. We will be doing that, and maybe Texas wants to think about something similar.
I think something really immediately and important is social media activism right now. And not in an emotional way, but in a direct way. Remembering Marielle, remember her dad, asking for justice, connect it to other cases that you guys may know. We need noise. We need to make some noise now, because this is something that, of course, we as black people and black activists in Brazil, we are not going to forget. But it's easier to forget, because tomorrow is going to be someone else. Tomorrow it's going to have another issue. The media in Brazil is not going to talk. And the media in Brazil is still talking about that because the international media is talking about that. So we need to keep this wheel moving. And is that the main help that I can think now? Keep the wheel moving. Keep talking about Marielle. If you are a member of any community organization, talk about Marielle. Invite people to talk about Marielle. Bring Marielle's situation. Compare with other police brutality, other police violence, with so many hate discourse that we are listening in this world that create something like that, that allow something like that. I think for me this is the main thing to do right now.
I feel both without words and overcome with words. I think that's the best way to describe it. There's so much to be done, and yet right now everything feels very raw, and it just feels very difficult to move. I'm just expressing how I feel. I think that I want to echo what Daniela said. I think that international pressure, transnational pressure, global pressure is absolutely critical. I have some of my students from my class, my Black Women's Studies and the Transnational State class, and one of the things that I said that day, I want to repeat, because I think it's really important for us to recognize the problem is less now. I'm not worried about this week, and I'm not worried about next week. I'm worried about 2 months from now. I'm worried about 3 months from now. I'm worried about 6 months from now. Because for those of us that have been doing this work for a long time, we know how this works. They kill somebody, there's a huge clamor, they wait, and then they do it again. Right now, one thing that we all should be working against is the character assassination that they're starting on her. That, and I want to emphasize, that is modus operandi for police killings. Just like they do it for the 14-year-old kid in the favela, they're doing it at Marielle. And I want us to really understand that, because I don't want us to think that Marielle is exceptional in that regard. Because every time you read a case about some kid getting killed, and then later they say he was a traficante, he was a drug dealer, I want you to question it. I want you to question it in Brazil, and I want you to question it here, because it's usually a lie. So we need to work against her character assassination. We need to be supporting her family in whatever way that they need to be supported right now. We need to be supporting any and all organizers who are out there fighting against police terror, because they are being targeted right now as we speak. Like I said, it's not next week, it's not the week after. I worry about June. I worry about August. Every time there is a manifestation. Protest, thank you. Every time there is a protest, every time there is outcry, they push back. I'm not going to take too long, but I have to say this. When the military police killed those 12 boys in Kabul, what did they do? They lied about it. Then they came back and they started targeting their families. That community doesn't have rest to this day. It's 2 years later. We have got to be vigilant. We have got to keep constant pressure. We can't just roll with the 24-hour news cycle. We have to always be watching and always be looking, and we have to keep attention on this. Marielle can't be a name that's forgotten. because she's not only a person that doesn't need to be forgotten, but she also represents something much, much bigger. And we have to carry that along. And I think the one thing I'll say, and then I won't say anything else, for those of us that are Black feminists, it is not lost on us that this is the first Black feminist assassination that I can recall. And our whole class spent the time on Monday trying to figure out if we were missing anybody. All of our sheroes have been threatened, have been exiled, have been tortured, have been imprisoned, but this is the first to die. Like this. We're going to put to the side heart attacks and cancer for right now. We're just going to focus on bullets. In terms of bullets, in terms of assassination, in terms of execution in the streets, that is something that we cannot let pass by as if it were just another moment.
Para completar o que Christen acabou de dizer aí, eu vou fazer aqui um desejo. Eu desejo que nenhum de vocês durmam pelos próximos anos. É isso.
Just to complement what Christen just said, I have a wish now, and my wish is that none of you will sleep for the next years. That's it.
We're over our time. And I want to just say thank you. I want to say thank you to Dr. James Green for coming to Texas to visit and then being forced to speak. But we do thank you. I want to thank Daniela Gomes, who's always someone who's speaking up and speaking out. And I want to thank Carla Ramos, who is another strong, constant presence here. And I want to just especially say to Carla, thank you for speaking through your pain today. I know this was a lot to ask, and there is nothing that we can do to actually repay you for that. But I do say that your words and your presence honored the memory of your friend, and we appreciate you sharing that with us.
Obrigada. Thank you.
And thank you to all of you for being here. We will, please pay, I'm going to work with Paloma. Please pay attention to the event page. We're going to put our heads together and really start to try to figure out concrete things we can put online that have links and have action items that you all can do to really make sure that Marielle is not forgotten. Marielle presente.
Presente.